My name is Pamela, and I am 53 years old. For 28 years, I believed my love was woven into the very walls of our home in Dayton, Ohio. This particular Mother's Day morning began like so many others, with the gentle Ohio light filtering through the old maple tree outside and painting the kitchen in soft dappled gold. I was at the counter mixing batter for blueberry pancakes, the smell of coffee rich in the air. It was a Sunday ritual that had survived the empty nest. Our son Jacob, 25, and in Chicago, and our daughter Emily, 22, and in Denver, had already called with their warm, hurried wishes, their voices a beautiful echo in the quiet house. Frank, my husband, was still asleep upstairs. I remember thinking how the peace felt earned a quiet reward after decades of chaotic, joyful mornings with sticky hands and loud laughter. I set the table for two, with the everyday plates feeling a familiar, if somewhat lonely contentment. Then Frank came down. His hair was damp from a quick shower, and he was already dressed in golf clothes, not the usual weekend jeans. He moved past me to the coffee pot, poured a travel mug. "Morning," he said, not quite looking at me. Then he turned, seemed to remember something, and reached into the pocket of his windbreaker. He pulled out a single stem of a fake rose, the kind with garish red petals and glittery green leaves, its stem wrapped in cheap green plastic. A $5.99 price sticker from the Quick Stop gas station was still stuck to it. He held it out. "Happy Mother's Day." The words were quick, perfunctory. He leaned in, gave me a dry peck on the cheek. "Sorry, gotta run. Tea time with the Johnson account. Big opportunity." And just like that, he was heading for the garage. "Frank," I called out, my voice strangely thin. He paused, hand on the door. "Thank you for the flower?" I said, the plastic stem cold and rigid in my fingers. He gave a short nod, a distracted smile. "Yeah, sure. We'll do dinner later." The door closed behind him. The silence that followed was different from the peaceful quiet of minutes before. It was a heavy, ringing silence. I looked down at the flower. The glitter caught the light, mocking me. My gaze drifted to the back of the chair where he tossed his good navy blazer last night after some client dinner. From the breast pocket, a crisp corner of white paper peeked out. I told myself to leave it alone. I told myself it was nothing. But my feet carried me across the cool tile. My heart thumped a slow, thick rhythm in my ears. I pulled out the paper. It was a receipt. The header read, "The Prestige Motor Group." It was a deposit confirmation, $5,000. The line for vehicle description simply said, Mercedes-Benz GLC 300. The total sale price listed below made my breath catch. The date was Thursday, May 9th, 3 days before Mother's Day. A plastic flower for me. A luxury car deposit for who that plastic flower felt so cold in my hand. Has there ever been a moment, a small, silly detail that made your entire world tilt just a fraction? If you are listening from somewhere, maybe dealing with your own quiet disappointments, I would be grateful if you could let me know in the comments below where you are watching from. And if you want to stay with me through this, please consider subscribing. What I did next was not what anyone expected. For a long time, I just stood there in the middle of my sunlit kitchen, holding those two pieces of paper, the flimsy receipt and the stiff plastic flower. The contrast was so violent it was almost funny. A bitter laugh caught in my throat. I placed the flower on the granite countertop. It stood there, an absurd, cheerfully ugly monument to something I could not yet name. I folded the car receipt carefully, my hand steady in a way that surprised me, and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. The rest of the day passed in a muffled haze. I cleaned up the breakfast mess I had not eaten. I watered the plants on the sun porch. I tried to read a book, but the words swam on the page. Every logical part of my brain scrambled for an explanation. A company car, a bonus for a top employee, a joint investment with a business partner. But the Frank owned a small regional industrial supply firm. His clients were factory managers and plant foremen. He drove a Ford F-150 with a dent in the tailgate from a long-ago run-in with a dumpster. A Mercedes SUV was not a tool for that trade. It was a statement. And he had not made that statement to me. Needing to hear a voice that was not the screaming panic in my head, I called Jacob. We made small talk about his new apartment, his job at the marketing firm. Then casually, as if it were nothing, I asked, "So how's your dad's new car treating him? Must be a nice upgrade from the old truck." There was a slight pause on the line. "Oh, the Mercedes. Yeah, he was super pumped about it when we talked last week. Said it was finally time to look the part for the big clients. I think he said it's silver. Mom, are you okay? You sound kind of weird." I forced lightness into my voice. "Just tired, honey, and missing you guys on Mother's Day. It's too quiet here." We hung up with promises to visit soon. Mercedes, silver, confirmed. That evening, Frank returned home just after 7. He smelled of grass and cigar smoke. "How was golf?" I asked from the sofa where I was pretending to watch television. "Fine. Good. Productive," he said, not meeting my eyes. He was already scrolling through his phone, a slight smile playing on his lips as he tapped out a message. "Any good shots?" I pressed a strange need to engage him to see if he could look at me. "Oh yeah. Sank a 15-footer on the 18th. Clutch." He finally glanced up. "You have a good day." His gaze was polite, distant, the way you might look at a friendly acquaintance. It was quiet. I said again, studying his face, this landscape I knew so well. I saw the new lines around his eyes, the way his hair was thinning just so at the temples. I did not see the man who had kissed me in this very room on 1,000 ordinary mornings. I saw a pleasant stranger occupying my husband's skin. "Did you get the steaks out for dinner?" he asked, already heading for the stairs to change. "I'm not really hungry," I said to his retreating back. He just waved a hand. "Suit yourself. I'll grab something later." The first crack had not just appeared. It had been expertly papered over for who knows how long, and now the wallpaper was tearing, revealing rotten plaster beneath. I was the only one in the house who could see it. The knowledge settled in my stomach like a stone. The week that followed was an exercise in surreal normalcy. I went to my garden club meeting on Tuesday and smiled as Mrs. Wilkins complained about her aphids, all while my mind replayed the image of that receipt. I pushed my cart through the grocery store, carefully selecting Frank's favorite cuts of meat, feeling like an actress playing a part. The most profound disconnect came during my Thursday visit to Maple Grove Senior Living to see Frank's mother, Eleanor. Her world stolen piece by Alzheimer's often felt more honest than mine. That day, she was having a good day. She recognized me immediately, her blue eyes sharp. "Pamela, you look tired, my dear." She patted the seat next to her wheelchair. "Sit. Tell me what that son of mine is up to." I took her frail hand, the skin like tissue paper over delicate bones. "Oh, work, golf, the usual," I said, my voice tight. Eleanor snorted a surprisingly strong sound. "Chasing shiny things. Always has. Even when he was a boy, he'd trade his good baseball mitt for a handful of those foil wrappers because they sparkled." She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "He doesn't see what's right in front of him. You're the real thing. Solid. He's out there chasing fool's gold, Pamela. Always will be." Her words, so close to my own silent terror, broke the dam. The tears I had been holding back for days finally came hot and silent. Eleanor just held my hand tighter. There. The truth hurts, but living a lie kills you slower." On the drive home, her words echoed. Living a lie kills you slower. I could not do it anymore. I pulled over and dug out the napkin from my purse, the one Diane had given me over coffee 3 days prior. My friend had taken one look at my strained face and said, "You're going to make yourself sick with this. You need to know, for you." Ben Miller's number was scrawled in her decisive handwriting. My hand shook as I dialed. His voice was calm, professional. We set a meeting for the next morning in his office, located in a bland beige building that housed accountants and insurance agents. It was the most clandestine thing I had ever done. Ben Miller's office was reassuringly ordinary. He was a man in his late 60s, with a kind lived-in face and eyes that held no judgment, only a quiet attentiveness. He made me tea and let me stumble through my story, the growing distance, the plastic flower, the receipt, my son's confirmation. When I mentioned I had little access to our detailed finances, that Frank handled all of it, he simply nodded. It's not uncommon, but it leaves you vulnerable. Let's start with what we can find legally and go from there. Discretion is my priority, Mrs. Fowler. The week of waiting was agony. I jumped every time the phone rang. Frank was home more than usual, which felt like a cruel joke. He was almost solicitous, asking about my day, offering to pick up dinner. It felt like the careful behavior of a man with a guilty conscience, not the warmth of a reconnecting husband. When Ben finally called, his voice was gentle but firm. He asked to meet at a small independent bookstore cafe across town, not his office. The drive there felt like heading to my own sentencing. He was already seated in a back corner booth, a plain manila folder on the table between us. I'm sorry, he said softly before I even sat down. The evidence is quite clear. He opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a photograph. Frank, his head thrown back in laughter, his arm draped casually around the shoulders of a beautiful dark-haired woman. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, dressed in stylish, expensive-looking casual wear. They were standing outside a sleek modern apartment complex called the Alexander. The next photo showed them entering a restaurant I knew was notoriously pricey and romantic. My vision tunneled. Ben laid out documents with methodical calm. A lease agreement for an apartment at the Alexander, the lessee Cassandra Reed, the co-signer Frank Fowler, monthly rent that was more than my first mortgage payment, bank statements from an account. I had never seen a business subsidiary showing bi-weekly automatic transfers to an account listed under Cassandra Reed. And then the final piece, the bill of sale, a silver Mercedes-Benz GLC 300, sold to Cassandra Reed, Franklin Fowler listed as co-signer on the loan. The date of purchase, May 9th. I stared at the papers. I expected to sob, to scream. Instead, a profound coldness spread through me from my core out to my fingertips. It was the cold of absolute certainty. I thanked Ben, my voice sounding miles away, paid him with a check from my personal account, and took the copies he offered in a sealed envelope. I got in my car and drove not home but to an address printed on one of the papers. I parked across the street from the Alexander. I sat there for 2 hours watching the glass and steel entrance, and then I saw them. Frank emerged first, holding the door. He was smiling, relaxed, wearing clothes I had never seen, a soft-looking cashmere sweater, dark jeans. She followed Cassandra, laughing at something he said. She was even more striking in person. He led her to the passenger side of a gleaming silver Mercedes SUV parked prominently in a visitor spot. He opened the door for her with a flourish, a gesture I realized he had stopped doing for me years ago. As the car purred to life and pulled away, something inside me broke cleanly in two. The Pamela who was a wife who built a life around this man shattered. What was left in the driver's seat of my sensible sedan was someone new, someone forged in betrayal and a quiet, terrifying rage. I did not go home. I drove to a craft store and bought a simple blank leather-bound journal. At my kitchen table, under the soft glow of the pendant light, I opened it. On the first pristine page, I wrote in ink that did not waver the exit plan. The plan required a kind of focus I had not needed in decades. It was a project, and I threw myself into it to avoid the bottomless grief that lurked just beneath the surface. My first strategic move was to call Diane and ask for the name of a ruthless, good divorce attorney. Lawrence Henderson, she said without hesitation. He's expensive, but he's a shark. He'll protect you. Larry Henderson's office was all dark wood and framed legal degrees. He did not offer tea. He listened, took notes, and when I finished, he looked at me over his glasses. Pamela, you are entitled to far more than half. He has been dissipating marital assets for what looks like at least 18 months. We need a forensic accountant. But first, we need you to document everything. Every stick of furniture, every bank statement, every stock portfolio. Be a ghost in your own house. And so I became a ghost. During the days when Frank was at work, I documented our life. I took hundreds of photos on my phone, every room from every angle, serial numbers on appliances, the maker's marks on our silverware. I found the fireproof lockbox in the back of Frank's closet. The combination was our anniversary, a bitter irony. Inside, I found the full picture of our finances investment accounts. I was vaguely aware of the deed to the house tax returns. I photographed every page. I found the login information for our main joint account on a sticky note stuck to the inside of the box. When I logged in, I saw the reality of our money flowing out. Large cash withdrawals before his golf weekends, charges for hotels in nearby cities for florists, for jewelry stores I had never frequented. I needed a cover story for my own absences. I told Frank my lower back was acting up again, that my doctor recommended physical therapy twice a week. I also mentioned offhandedly that I was seeing a new sleep specialist for my insomnia. He barely registered the information. "Okay, whatever you need, Pam," he muttered, distracted by a text message that made him smile. Those appointments became my lifeline. I met with Larry to review documents. I interviewed and hired a no-nonsense realtor named Susan, who specialized in quick, discreet sales. I rented a small climate-controlled storage unit in the next town over under my maiden name, Peterson. One evening, Frank seemed to notice my preoccupied silence. "You've been quiet lately," he said almost accusingly. I looked up from my book. "Just tired, and Mother's Day. It just felt lonely with the kids so far away." A flicker of something guilt annoyance passed over his face. The next day, he came home and tossed a credit card onto the kitchen counter. "Here, the new platinum card came. Go buy yourself something nice. A new dress, get your hair done. You deserve it." It was the primary card on our joint account, the one with the $25,000 limit. I picked it up, feeling its cool, embossed weight. I smiled a genuine, grateful smile that reached my eyes for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Frank. That's so thoughtful." He had just handed me the master key to my own liberation. The final catalyst came a week later. He announced over dinner that he had to attend a major industry conference in Denver. 10 days, lots of networking, maybe some skiing if I get time. His eyes were bright with excitement. I knew from Ben Miller's report that Cassandra had booked a luxury wellness retreat at a seaside resort in South Carolina for those exact dates. The house for 10 full days and nights would be entirely blessedly mine. The moment I heard Frank's car turn out of our subdivision, the energy in the house shifted. The stillness was no longer oppressive. It was charged with purpose. My first call was not to the liquidation company, but to a sweet-voiced young woman named Chloe at the local animal shelter. An hour later, I was bringing home a timid 8-year-old tabby cat named Mabel. I needed a living being in this empty house who was solely mine, who would not betray me. She hid under the bed for a day, and that was fine. My second call was to a state liquidation pro. My third was to the college student who had responded to my online ad for the SUV. He came with cash, counted out the agreed $7,000 on my kitchen counter, and drove away in the car that had carried my children to soccer practice. It felt less like a sale and more like a shedding. The liquidation team arrived at 8 a.m. sharp on the second day, 3 men with gentle hands and rolling carts. I handed the team leader, a man named Leo, my detailed room-by-room inventory. "Everything on this list goes," I said, my voice calm and firm. "I'll be in the study if you have questions." I then retired to what had been Frank's home office, now just a room with a desk, and used his precious platinum card. I booked a rental truck online for a one-way trip to Bellbrook. I purchased packing supplies, a new set of luggage, and paid the first and last month's rent on the small apartment I had secured after a single anonymous viewing. I ordered a new laptop and a prepaid mobile phone to be delivered to a FedEx store under the name P. Peterson. Every click of the confirm purchase button was a small, satisfying rebellion. The sounds from the rest of the house were the soundtrack of my old life being dismantled. The low rumble of furniture sliders, the rustle of packing paper, the murmured directions. I walked through occasionally. I watched as they carefully wrapped the large, abstract painting we bought on a trip to Santa Fe, the one Frank claimed to hate but I loved. I saw them carry out the massive television, the leather recliner Frank napped in every Sunday, the solid oak dining table that had hosted birthday parties and Thanksgiving feasts. They took the expensive golf simulator Frank had installed in the basement during the pandemic. They took the set of sterling silver candlesticks from my mother-in-law. They took it all. By the afternoon of the third day, the house was an echo chamber. The only furniture left was our king-sized bed. I had ordered a new one for the apartment, a single reading lamp, a folding chair, and the kitchen table, which was slated for donation. Mabel the cat had emerged and was warily exploring the strange empty spaces. On the fourth day, I met Susan the realtor in the barren living room. The echo of our voices was unnerving. "It will show better empty," she said pragmatically, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I signed the listing agreement. The for sale sign would go up the following Monday. On the final day, I packed my personal items into the rental truck. My clothes, my books, my photo albums, the box of letters from my mother, my grandmother's quilt, my own modest jewelry box. It all fit with room to spare. Then I cleaned. I scrubbed the bathroom, swept the floors, wiped down the windowsills. It was a ritual cleansing. Finally, in the center of the vast, empty living room floor, I arranged 3 items with ceremonial care. The plastic flower from Quick Stop, the investigative report from Ben Miller open to the page with the Mercedes bill of sale, and a plain white legal envelope. Inside was the filed petition for divorce and a single sheet of notepaper with a message I had drafted and redrafted a dozen times. It now read only, "Frank, I found the receipt for your real gift. The house is on the market. My lawyer will be in touch. Do not try to find me. Pamela." I took one last walk through the hollow shell. I touched the light switch in the hallway that Jacob had colored on with crayon when he was 3. I stood in the doorway of Emily's old room now, just a square of faded paint. Then I picked up Mabel's carrier, locked the front door, and slid the key into a smaller envelope addressed to Susan. As I drove the rented truck away from the curb, I did not allow myself to look in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady on the wheel. I was driving towards a void, but it was a void of my own choosing. The apartment in Bellbrook was a blank slate, beige walls, beige carpet, a faint smell of clean linen and emptiness. The first night, the silence was so absolute, it felt deafening. Mabel hid in the closet. I lay on the air mattress I had bought, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling texture, feeling untethered from the universe. The grief hit then, not as a storm, but as a slow, sinking tide. It was not just for Frank, but for the life I thought I had for the future I had meticulously planned that now lay in ashes. The next morning, I forced myself into a routine. I bought a cheap coffee maker and a single mug. I went for a walk in the small park nearby, noting the time the sun hit certain benches. I saw a flyer on the community bulletin board for a pottery class at the senior center. Adults 50 plus. Find your center with clay. The next Tuesday I went. My hands shook as I tried to center the lump of clay on the wheel. The instructor, a patient woman named Gloria, placed her hands over mine. Let the clay find its own balance, don't force it. It felt like a metaphor for my entire life. The class was full of people with their own unwritten stories, a retired teacher, a widower, a woman who had just moved to town to be near her grandkids. We talked about glaze techniques and kiln temperatures, a safe, neutral language. It was a beginning. Using the spousal support from the temporary orders, I enrolled in an online certification program for wedding and event planning. I had always been the one to organize the school auctions, the neighborhood block parties. I set up my laptop on the small secondhand table that was now my desk. Learning again being graded was terrifying. My first quiz on vendor contract law, I failed. I cried over the keyboard, then printed it out, studied the notes, and retook it until I passed. The small victory felt enormous. One afternoon at the grocery store, I heard a voice call my name. It was Diane. She was in the organic produce section, holding a bunch of kale. We stared at each other for a second, and then she dropped the kale and rushed over, pulling me into a tight hug right there between the tomatoes and the avocados. We both cried. We went for coffee that same day, and for the first time I told someone the whole unvarnished story, the coldness, the fear, the meticulous planning, the hollow victory. She listened, and then she said, "I am so proud of you. You saved yourself." My children visited often. Jacob drove in one weekend, his face etched with concern that melted into relief when he saw my clean if sparse apartment and the determined light in my eyes. Emily came and spent a week sleeping on my sofa. We cooked simple meals together and talked about things we never had before her career, fears, my dreams for a small business. They saw me as Pamela, a person, not just mom. It was a painful, beautiful shift. I finished my first pottery project, a lopsided, thick-walled bowl with a wobbly rim. I glazed it a terrible shade of murky green. I brought it home and placed it on the windowsill where the morning light hit it. It was objectively ugly, but I had made it. That night, I sat in the darkening living room, looking at that ugly bowl. I did not feel happy, but I felt something I had not felt in years, a fragile, tentative sense of agency. I was still here. I was breathing, and the very air in the room belonged to me. A year has passed now. The official divorce papers arrived in a thin, legal-sized envelope last week. I held them at my new desk in the corner of my apartment that now serves as my office for Pamela Fowler Events, a fledgling venture that has so far planned 2 small weddings and a retirement gala. I expected to feel a seismic shift of final closing. I felt only a quiet click, like a lock gently turning. The chapter was formally concluded. My apartment is no longer beige. The walls are a soft sage green. The windowsills hold my collection of increasingly less terrible pottery and thriving spider plants. Mabel now rules the sofa, her purr, a constant comforting rumble. I think of Frank rarely, and when I do, it is without the sharp sting of betrayal. It is with a distant, almost clinical pity. We were a partnership built on an outdated blueprint, and I was the only one still trying to live in the building, while he had quietly bought a new plot of land. The plastic flower is long gone, tossed into a dumpster behind the quick stop on my way out of town that final day. But the lesson it carried is now part of my bones. Love should never be a currency you trade yourself for. For 28 years, I thought being a good wife, a good mother, meant quietly erasing my own boundaries, my own desires to keep the peace and prop up the facade. That plastic flower was not just a cheap gift. It was the final insulting receipt for a lifetime of discounts I had given myself on my time, my dreams, my worth. My leaving was never about punishing Frank. It was about finally mercifully stopping the punishment I had allowed, even encouraged by my own silence. Sometimes, the most loving and radical thing you can do for everyone involved, especially yourself, is to quietly stand up from a table where you have been treated not as an honored guest, but as part of the furniture expected used and utterly unseen. I am 54 now. The future is not a clear paved path. It is an open meadow, wild and overgrown and full of unseen holes. It is terrifying. But for the first time since I was a young woman, with my whole life ahead of me, it is undeniably, irrevocably mine. I look at my hands. They are older, marked with fine lines and a few permanent clay stains under the nails. They are also capable, strong, and they are holding a life I built with intention, mistake by mistake, choice by choice. What about you listening to my story? Have you ever had a moment, a whispered comment, a forgotten birthday, a neglected promise that felt like a plastic flower, A moment where you realized you were accepting trinkets when you deserved treasure? What was that moment for you? I would really love to hear your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. Sharing our truths is how we find our tribe. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. It lets me know these shared experiences matter and helps others find this conversation. And if you want to join me for more honest talks about rebuilding, rediscovering, and reclaiming our lives at any age, please hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, for your time, and for your courage. Wherever you are on your journey, I wish you peace, the strength to trust your own voice, and the power to always hold your own life firmly and lovingly in your own two hands.